Welcome, guys. We are back for another episode of The Lock-In. I'm joined, as always, by the now twice GPI Global Poker Award nominated Dara O'Kearney. Dara, how are you today?
I'm very good. You said twice nominated. I mean, I guess for the chip race, yeah. I'm also claiming a third one. Obviously, the Last Call documentary.
Oh, yeah.
Which is all about me, obviously. Well, I mean, okay, there's two episodes about Patrick Antonius and there's one episode about Jens Kulinen. But it's great to be up for the podcast thing again. Thanks to everybody who voted for us, but mostly thanks to everybody who listens to us and who helps us spread the word on social media.
Absolutely. And I must say, the only episode of that documentary I watched was your one. So as far as I'm concerned, you're the star of that one too. It was lovely to be a guest in your own home there just only a few days ago, Dara.
Indeed, yeah. It was great to have you over. I wrote my review of last year's blog, and the main theme was maybe we'll get back to normal this year. There is kind of grounds for optimism on that front, and we're all going to have to learn how to socialize again and meet people in person.
Exactly. Well, I do want to point out at this point that you do seem to have a nasty graze on your chin there, and you may be bleeding from that graze throughout this this lock-in. Can you maybe assure our listeners and viewers that nothing terrible happened to you?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I got into a fight with an anti-vaxxer. Things got very, very no, on a serious note, it's the only time I ever shave these days is for this show because it's webcams on. And about half an hour ago, I gashed myself pretty badly. I'm obviously completely out of practice in shaving. So I'll be dabbing the blood away from it when I'm off screen, but you will see me probably bleeding on screen.
Good stuff. Well, joining us this week is a familiar face. He is our fellow Unibet ambassador. He is the never GPI Global Poker Award nominated Ian Simpson. Ian, welcome to the show.
What a lovely welcome. Yes, thank you for that awfully warm welcome. So kind.
Well, look, Ian, you might not be recognized for your work as a streamer this year, but you did make a triumphant return. But you did make a triumphant return to the live felt last week, final tabling, both the high roller and the main event of the 888 Live Festival in London. How many trophies did you pick up there?
I got close to two.
Close to a trophy, okay.
Yeah, close to two trophies.
You did get pretty close to two trophies. In fairness, Dara and I played the Unibet IPO and the WSOP in the autumn of last year, but this was the first time you ventured outside of your house for poker in almost, I want to say 2 years. I think it's 2 years.
More than 2 years.
More than 2 years, my goodness. Apart from the final tables, which I promise I will ask you about in just a moment or two, how was the experience of going to the big city, going to London?
Your audio just went mental there, David.
Oh no, did my audio go weird? Apologies to our listeners there.
Fuck the listeners, you deafened me and Dara.
Well,
scared the shit out of us. Also, the camera is never panning to me. It's always highlighted on you, David.
It goes to the moneymaker.
It goes to the moneymaker. Yeah.
I apologize for that horrible sound, and I will try and remove that sound in edit, which will make it even more weird that we're referring to the sound that hopefully you guys don't have to listen to. But Eni, to answer my question, what was it like going to the big city and playing some live poker?
It was mixed. I woke up on Wednesday morning with this big sense of dread of, I don't want to leave. I don't want to leave my house. Which is crazy because I love live poker. I love traveling, and I haven't done it in, like you said, 2.5 years. I missed the last Unibet Open of 2019 because Emma was pregnant then. So it's before then was my last live event. But as soon as I got on the train, I just sort of tucked into a good book and was quite content. And then I got to London and saw the familiar sights of London and felt, kind of back to normal. Then walked into the Vic and there was real poker players there. I haven't seen a poker player in 2.5 years. So I got a huge hug from Jack Hardcastle. I got a huge hug from the Tower and all these other wonderful poker players who I've missed dearly. These friends who I've been getting to know these people for over a decade of playing poker, and I finally got to see them again after so long. So it was just fucking fantastic.
And not only was it nice to see everybody, but it turns out you remember how to play live poker too. No crazy eyes, I assume. Tell us briefly, because that was a very long-winded story about your day out in London.
Jack,
tell us briefly about the final table, or both final tables.
No, you said I remember how to play poker. I really fucking didn't. Jack said that player on your table is a right fucking weapon. Those were his exact words. And he's a tell box. So there was this guy who was limping Queen 6 offsuit and calling raises out of position. It was wonderful. But Jack said he's a massive tell box. So I flop top pair against the guy, and he starts lighting his stack on fire, and he jams all in on the turn, and I've got top pair. And I almost snap called, but then I thought, I'll think about live tells, because Jack said this guy's a tell box, and I'm looking at the guy, and he's acted really quick, and he's quite animated. And I looked at him and I thought, I have no fucking idea about your hand strength from any of your mannerisms. I'd completely forgotten the whole fucking lot.
How useful was it that Jack just told you he's a tell box, but didn't tell you what his tell was?
Well, I just assumed it was obvious, and then I'm looking at him, and he's making all these like movements and like not being like discreet or anything, and I still have no idea. Is he full of it? Does he have it?
You also neglected to say you had top pair, but like, what was your kicker? Was it a 2?
Queen.
Was it a 4?
It was the queen, and it was good. He had 10 jack offsuit against my queen 10 suited, and I got him.
Well, go on. Where did you finish in each tournament? And then we'll move on, because I hate talking about your success.
Yeah, of course. I got 8th in the high roller, and I got 5th in the main event. I got $5,500 in the high roller, and I got 19,000 something in the main.
Nice. Well, congratulations on that. Dara, the last live tourney you played was the WSOP Turbo that you final tabled. Since then, obviously, it's been more restrictions in Ireland, postponing, I know, a few events that were on the calendar. Are you chomping on the bit now for a bit of live poker, or not too fussed?
Probably similar to Vegas, mixture of dread and excitement. Not exactly chomping at the bit, but there is going to be a lot of live poker. I haven't broken it to my wife yet, but yeah, there's the Irish Poker Tour Grand Final, which has been rescheduled from the end of January, is now towards the end of February. Then I'll probably do Prague, almost certainly do Prague, and then obviously we'll be into Norwegians and Irish Open, which at time of airing, it looks optimistic that will go ahead. The government, the noise is kind of coming from the government here that things will be back to pretty much normal, maybe by the end of March. So that'll be just in time for the Irish Open. Before that, I will get sort of a second-hand taste briefly of live poker. I'm doing some commentary this weekend on the World Series of Poker Circuit main event in Rosvedov. I don't have to travel to Rosvedov for that. I'll be doing it from home, but
yay!
At least I will see what live poker looks like on the screen.
Very good, very good. Well, on the subject of live poker in Ireland, there were 3 big announcements in the last few weeks. As you say, maybe the restrictions in Ireland suggest that it's going to be March, but the Irish Poker Tour final will now be scheduled for Limerick on February 24th, having originally been planned for Galway in late January. The Irish Open, I believe, is going to go ahead in City West again, fingers crossed for that one, from the 11th to the 18th of April. And then the Dublin Poker Festival, which has historically been sponsored by Unibet, we don't know if it will be yet, but fingers crossed for that too, has been postponed from its original date, which I think was going to be February, but now it's going to be in the Bonington Hotel from the 28th of April to the 8th of May. So that's a good bit away. So there's a very good chance that one will go ahead. I want to move on now. Speaking, I suppose, of the experience of playing live after so long, Ian, I noticed that you opted to wear a mask at the table in London. That is when you weren't stuffing your face full of oatmeal or banana or whatever else that you were sticking in your gob. This drew some curious comments I felt from people in chat and on Twitter. The answer seems pretty obvious, but you're a science guy, so why don't you explain the reasons that you chose to wear a mask?
Why did I wear a mask during a pandemic?
Yeah.
It's a fucking mystery, isn't it?
It was so weird.
For those genuinely wondering, and someone pointed out that, well, I was eating at the table. Well, yeah, of course I was eating. Humans tend to need to do that if they want to fucking function. But yeah.
What about all the COVID that was sprinkled on your oatmeal, though?
That's it. Extra oatmeal-y COVID. So yeah, wearing a mask reduces your viral load. If you wear it for 30 seconds, that is 30 seconds of a reduced viral load. And the more viral particles you are introduced to in any one instance, the more severe your infection will be. So wearing a mask for half the time would be better than not wearing the mask at all. Wearing the mask 90% of the time, which although I was eating a lot, I think it was probably 89% of the time I was wearing the mask. So that was reducing the viral particles that could escape from me and get into my face for those length of the time while I was wearing the mask.
Yeah, I noticed enough sort of sciencey words there from my junior cert, biology and chemistry or whatever it was. Speaking of science, I've noticed you, Ian, getting regular debates with Alex Foxon and Chrissy Bicknell on Twitter. If you had to sum up the crux of your disagreement with those guys, because I know it's sort of sometimes it's a different article as a jumping off point or a different tweet that one or other of you have put out there. What would you say it sort of keeps boiling down to?
Well, first of all, I want to point out that typically things that are debates haven't been settled, whereas the science on all this has been settled. So it's not a debate, it's just pointing out why they're wrong. What does it boil down to? That scientists have put in a lot of work finding out the efficacy and safety of a vaccine for the pandemic we are enduring, and the safety and efficacy of the masks. Can't believe that's a fucking debate on the spread of COVID-19. And it comes down to, it's kind of weird because they'll present information and then one of their go-tos is to look at VIA's data and they say, oh, there's been this many deaths since the vaccines. And then when you go to the VIA's website, it says this data is not to be used in that way. And then they cry foul, saying, well, it obviously can't be trusted then. But hang on, you were the one using that data to make your points. So it's kind of trying to have it both ways. And the problem with debates like these is that people who are against vaccines for whatever reason, people who've fallen for the misinformation, cry foul on whatever evidence you produce. So if you produce a peer-reviewed study it's been looked at by scientists and looked at by independent scientists, if it doesn't agree with them, they immediately dismiss it as fraudulent, as bogus, as corrupt. So as soon as evidence won't be listened to for that reason, you can't have a debate. There's no going forward from that point. If you decry everything that disagrees with you as a hoax, there's no discussion to be had.
Yeah, my biggest concern when looking at this stuff, because again, I will be very honest, and something Dara says a lot when it's come up on the show, because it's obviously a topic that gets discussed because it has real world implications on poker and things we do. But it does feel as though these guys have exercised a skeptical part of their brain, which is no harm. It's good to be skeptical, particularly when big pharma and politicians are involved, not necessarily, and certainly historically bad actors at times. But it just feels like they've abandoned those sources of information and then gone for even worse ones, which does feel like the same skepticism isn't being deployed as rigorously, certainly, then when they find things on, freedomeagle69.com or whatever the site they've found their new COVID.
Yeah. It bamboozles me that someone can be so adept in one very complicated area of life, poker, and then not be able to have that, because you've got to be honest and self-reflecting in poker, and you've got to be intellectually honest with yourself, and to not be able to apply that skill to another topic seems crazy, but that's what's going on.
Well, one final bit of COVID discussion. This is actually a subject Dara and I have weighed in on. We discussed it with Jennifer Tilley on our Christmas show not long ago. But I know you have a strong opinion on it too, Ian. What should happen to players who have a stack but find out midway through a tournament that they have COVID?
Yeah, this is not fucking easy at all. I put a post on social media about this before we knew Omicron existed. And I was calling for ICM payouts for people who test positive, who have a day 2 to play. Because the alternative is to hope that a player will be honest, get a test, if testing positive, surrender the equity. I think I put this out before the World Series. So my example at the time was looking at the main event. If you bag 10 starting stacks in a 10K event, your equity, 100K, right? You're asking someone to surrender 100K's worth of equity. I mean, less with ICM and whatnot, but you're asking people to surrender a lot of equity for the benefit of others. Human beings aren't always very good at that. Putting other people before themselves. And yeah, my views lately changes a little bit because we don't know everything about Omicron yet, but obviously still on the cautious side of things. There's also problems with, Willie Elliott pointed out that at Poker Stars for their events, instead of disqualifying the stacks of people who test positive, they would let them blind out, so then they've got a chance of getting into the money. But I would argue that's still not enough to get people to be honest, to not play the event if they tested positive. And that an ICM payout, even a capped ICM payout, so maybe they could only get X percentage of the prize pool from their ICM value of their stack, then there was a cap on the amount they could cash out with. I think that would be a very reasonably fair way of going ahead, which would also protect the players in terms of public safety as well. We do have a new variant though, and we don't know everything about the new variant yet. So the discussion has to be reopened as we learn more about Omicron as well.
Yeah, some good suggestions there. Obviously, Dara, you and I sort of settled. I don't know if we fully agreed, but I guess we were sort of fumbling around similar to what Ian's doing there to try and figure out what is fair. And I guess we sort of settled on to maybe 80% of ICM being incentivizing enough to be honest and not over incentivizing sort of licking lampposts for COVID when you had a lot of ICM equity going into a day 4 or something.
Yeah, I think that's an important point too, because if you give somebody their full ICM, you know, they will reach a point where many people, let's say, would actually just take their ICM as a preference to playing. If there's 80 people left and your ICM is worth a couple of $100,000 and 80th is paying $15,000, you have a pretty strong incentive, or at least a lot of people would, to sort of cash in at that point. And, you know, you even see that deep in the WSOP main event. For example, Jack Sinclair famously sold himself at ICM when he made the final table. You might have people who make the final table of the World Series main event going, well, next payout's $1 million, but my ICM is $5 million. Maybe I'll just get COVID and take that $5 million. So I guess there has to be some sort of punishment factor on that as well. Before we move on to COVID, I have been following Ian's debates, and I think part of the problem here is just the casting of the different roles. Like, I can buy Alex Fox in the kind of like jock who's a bit suspicious of all the nerds and doesn't fully believe that they're doing it. But I really don't buy Ian as the and here's the science guy. Like Ian is the mad lad in chemistry who's just swallowed whatever was in the test tube, and then now has to be rushed to hospital. He's not the lad who's going to like bat for science.
Amazing. We might just stop the show there. I think we're not going to reach a higher point in this episode.
I mean, I'm fucked now. You've just debunked the side of the vaccines in the arguments now, Dara. Way to go. You're going to be responsible for the next wave. That's it.
Okay, moving on swiftly. Here is a topic we cover a lot on the chip race, but actually don't give it quite so much love on this show yet. Mental game coaching in poker takes many forms. We've had on the show in the past Jared Tendler, Trisha Gardner, Tommy Angelo, Elliot Rowe, and more recently Baman Zargami and Jason Su. Yesterday, Dara and I had a wonderful interview with Karina Karageva from Mindset Design, a mindset coach who approaches mental game improvement in a scientific way, skipping, in her words, the motivational bullshit. That interview will appear on an upcoming show, so do look out for it. But I thought it could be a nice springboard maybe for our own chat on the subject now. Dara, you're not a mental game coach, but you are a coach. What advice do you give players in this area?
Yeah, the only time I ever have to sort of lean into mental game coaching is when one of my students makes a big final table, and they generally come to me looking for a session at that point. Now, there's very little you can do for them technically at that point. Like, they're not going to learn in the next 3 to 4 hours exactly how to play a final table. Obviously, you can go through some technical stuff like their current stack size and what their current ICM is and how that might change if they doubled up. But one thing I found over the years doing this was that you can add a lot more value sort of by just preparing them mentally to play the final table. properly. And for me, the key to that has always been just to anticipate what can happen, specifically the bad things that can happen. Like, it's all very well telling a guy this is how you should play the final table. Then he goes in, he loses half of the stack first hand, and then he just goes on tilt and punts it off. So
look, he's sitting right here, Dara. There's no need to there's no need to be so mean.
Yeah, with his ninth and his fifth. So I went to this thing of where I sort of did a checklist of imagine all the things that can possibly go wrong for you. You lose half your stack to a bad beat, say, early on. That's going to affect you. Just think about how you would feel in that situation and how you would react, what you would do to prevent yourself actually going on tilt. Long periods of card death is another one. People get very impatient when they're card dead, and you kind of have to keep reminding yourself that you just have to keep playing your strategy and stick to that, irrespective of whether you're on a rush or you're card dead. So Karina is somebody I got to know on social media in the last couple of months, and was really impressed just by her approach and by the approach of her team in general. First of all, it's based on sound neuroscientific principles on how the human mind actually works, as opposed to how it's supposed people think it, or people hope it works. And one phrase which really jumped out for me when she describes herself is she describes herself as a demotivational speaker, not a motivation speaker, because it is kind of toxic, all this sort of, at least from my perspective, all this sort of, think positive and great things will happen, this magical thinking, which you see a lot in the poker world. It's far more useful, I think, to sort of anticipate negative, think negative, and then be prepared to react to it when it happens. As poker players, we constantly have to do that. Like I said once, poker is not difficult when everything is going well. The reason why poker is difficult is it's difficult to stick to your strategy and keep doing the right things when you're getting constantly punched in the face and bad beats left, right, and center. But that's really what makes a poker player long term. I'm personally very excited by Karina and her team's approach to this. And I think it's a very, very good fit for poker, where, we have more negative experiences than positive experiences.
Yeah, I'm reminded here, I don't know if it was a John Barnes commercial, but do you remember PMA? And it was an ad for milk or an ad for something on UK TV in the 80s. And it was sort of PMA, positive mental attitude, and that was sort of seen as the be all and end all. But I couldn't agree more with you. I think it's so much more dangerous to go in overconfident than it is to go in underconfident. Maybe specifically poker. Maybe there are other sports where you sort of want to keep your confidence high, and it makes a little bit more sense. But definitely in something that's punctuated like poker, and where the terrain can change as quickly as you described there. Obviously, Ian, what do you do to work on your mental game? Obviously, we've referred to your crazy eyes many times. Were the crazy eyes in London? You've had 2 years to work on it.
The crazy eyes did come out in London, but they came out. They came out with their own blockers. They've been upgraded. They know when. They know when to use a flush blocker now. So that's interesting.
So the eyes are just widening, staring at the blocker.
Yeah, just stare at that ace of.
I've got the two hearts.
Yes. What helps my mental game is just being prepared. I actually had a conversation with Dara not so long ago about how people treat the game. And Dara mentioned it's a lot more like university now, where the people who study are the ones who succeed. And throughout my life, whenever I've been studying, I felt confident. Like when I was at university, going into a test, the more I'd studied, the more confident I felt and the better I performed. I get confidence from study. And that makes when the bad beats happen a lot more palatable, because it's not an unknown situation. If I bust out in a tournament in a situation where I wasn't sure, that can dent my confidence because, well, I've come across something I don't know, so I haven't been prepared for it. So it's kind of on me. Regardless of how the beat occurred, I wasn't totally prepared. That is on me. So yeah, study gives you confidence. Confidence improves the mental game. It lets you take the bad things, as Dara was talking about. And that's the other thing. When I went into the final tables this week, I looked at my stack and I had a good stack, and I said to myself, the guy on your left has half as many chips as you. You can lose half your stack in one hand, and just be prepared for that exact situation. So when it happened, and it did actually happen, I was, this is just one of the eventualities, and that's okay. On we go. I know what I'm doing with 20 bigs now.
Yeah, I remember that moment. I think you had ace king against kings, and you'd already put in the 3-bet, and he put in the 4-bet shove. So what were you going to do? If this is a subject, guys, that interests you, because I think a lot of poker players do take an interest in this, maybe after a certain point, maybe after they've sort of got a handle on some strategic stuff, and then they look for other ways to find edge. I do strongly recommend checking out our past interviews with all those mental game coaches I mentioned. I'd also recommend checking out Mindset Design's first podcast interview, which will be with Dara O'Carney in coming weeks. Dara, I know you're recording that with the guys tomorrow, so I'm fascinated to get your direct take right after, but obviously that will be like a 90-minute session or something in that vicinity. So I'm guessing you're going to go deep. I'm going to guess that you're going to get into a lot of good stuff there.
Yeah, I think we are. Yeah, Karina is very professional and sent me all the questions in advance, so I can think about what I'm going to say. We're going to go pretty deep and also talk about your favorite subject, the overlap between running and poker, and what I brought into running to poker.
I do love that subject, by the way. I just feel like occasionally our show is a running show.
Yeah. So, I'm very much looking forward to it. And I mean, I'm going to be the first episode they record, but I think they're also recording with other people like Abe Styles and some other heavy hitters. And I'm not sure which order they're going to go out in. I might not be the first one out, but it certainly should be out in the next month or so. I'm looking forward to the chat because I think we are kind of coming from a similar place on the whole mindset stuff. One thing that Ian said there, which I thought was absolutely excellent, was he talking about how when you have studied and you know a spot, that just automatically eradicates a lot of your mental game problems. That's a point Jared Tender actually made in our first book on satellites when we went and asked him to write a chapter. He said, look, if you learn everything that's in this book and you understand satellites, then you'll find it much easier to deal with, when you take a bad beat near a bubble or a satellite, for example, because you'll at least know that you made the right play and that you will make money in the long term. And I think that's something which is often overlooked. People sort of focus on maybe little mental tricks or ways of reframing things, which can be helpful, but really the most helpful thing is just to be very good at poker and to understand the spots. And then it's a lot easier to have a strong mental game. I think a lot of the naysayers in the mental area, and I'm thinking of people like Mason Malmuth, that's kind of their basic point. They're kind of saying, well, just get very, very good at poker and then these things aren't an issue. I think they still are an issue because, bad stuff happens and you have to be prepared for it. But nevertheless, the main point is one of the great ways to just improve your mental game is just improve your game, period.
Yep, well said. Next up, we're going to talk about poker ambassadors. It's always the case that poker ambassadors come in and out of those roles within sites and whatnot. Contracts with sites normally last 1 or 2 years. There's sometimes a bit of musical chairs too, with players moving between sites, one site to another, even onto another again. We all have been, of course, very lucky to be with Unibet for 5 years now. I think that actually makes us 3 of the longest serving ambassadors for their individual sites. In recent weeks, though, it seems like Party Poker specifically are slimming down their team. 2 fantastic ambassadors in Ike Haxton and Louise Butler ended their partnerships. I also noticed the hiring of DJ Steve Aoki to WPT and boxer Chris Eubank Jr. to 888. I'm sure there have been others, as I said, it's that time of year when, contracts tend to end and whatnot. But I couldn't help but notice there that it's sort of poker players out and these mainstream stars in. And we have seen this before, of course, in the industry. And I certainly can understand the reason why looking to get into the demographics of people who have big followings, particularly if it's sort of young male followings, which I guess is the sort of sweet spot in the eyes of a lot of poker marketeers, is where they have to find their next generation of players or whatnot. But I have to say that I am biased, sure, as a player, but I really don't like it. I don't like to see this lean into the mainstream stars over and above the sort of the good poker stories and good ambassadors and people who sort of have something to offer in that department, whether it be as a role model or a consultant internally or just like an iconic figure too. Dara, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, the poker industry seems to just kind of go backwards and forwards in this a lot. Obviously, when we started, it was almost unheard of for anybody who wasn't a poker player to be sponsored. And then there was a whole period where it seemed it was very hard as a poker player to get sponsored. And, you had to be a Hollywood star or a Brazilian footballer or a Spanish tennis player or something like that. And then they seem to come back to players, but kind of built around the content creation model, not just players who were making final tables, but players who were big on Twitch or who had a very successful podcast, or were well known for their content, let's say. To be honest, I'm not sure that this is a major trend. I mean, I would say, sample size. So we have had 2 non-poker people hired by poker sites. I'm not sure that it's going to be a massive trend, but it could be. I mean, we don't have access to the same data as the sites have, obviously. And I presume that they internally sort of work out how effective each hire is for them. And it might be the case that they're saying, well, actually, people with a big social media following who are not already in poker, if we can even get 1% to 1% of their followers in, that's more than a typical poker player ambassador will bring in. I'll be particularly interested to see what Gigi's direction is going forward, because I think the one big imponderable is the impact of Bilzerian. A lot of poker players have sort of said it's entirely negative, but we don't know that for sure. It's possible that some of his followers have come in and without wanting to brag about it, Gigi are keeping quiet. If Gigi go and sign other similar types of, outside of poker celebrities, then I think that would be a clear indication that, first of all, they think the Bilzerian signing actually was successful for them in terms of attracting new players. And I think other sites might then go in that direction as well. So I think the next few months will be quite interesting. See what GG do. Do they renew? Do they continue with Bilzerian, or do they get other players like that? Since they signed Bilzerian, they've mostly signed poker players. In fact, almost exclusively, I think. So let's say there are different signals out there.
But Dara, I thought Bilzerian made all his money from poker, and he fits the bill as one of these poker players. I'm confused now. I watched that podcast at Doug's, and now you say it this way. I don't know who to believe. Ian, your thoughts?
I've got a couple of thoughts. First thing that springs to mind.
Two?
Two at
once?
Thoughts
for 2 final tables, yeah. The first thing that springs to mind is that you don't see this in other demographics. You don't see chess companies particularly bringing in a big footballer to try and expand the reach of chess. And the reason they don't do that is because a professional footballer wouldn't be able to interact with chess players on that level. They're very good within their own niche. So if a recreational player approaches Dan Bilzerian, they're not going to get a very good answer about poker. They're not going to get very good feedback about that. I realized we were talking about, because I'm not classing him as a poker player. He's an Instagram dude.
Grifter.
Similar for if a big footballer in poker, if someone asks them about poker, it's going to be less intricate as if they ask Dara about poker. So another thought is, well, Dara said if they get 1% of 1% of their followers, clicking on the site, then that's going to be a good thing. One phenomena I got made aware of was something called Goodhart's law. And it's if you set a metric for success, the metric immediately becomes a bad measure. I hope I'm quoting that okay.
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah, because there are ways to hit that metric without actually being successful. If you give a social media guru a goal of getting this many likes on a post, well, so what if they get that many likes on a post from a business perspective? Like if Unibet said, okay, we want 10,000 likes on this post. Well, that doesn't matter. We need people on the site, not clicking on Facebook likes. So I also think that's kind of interesting. I wonder if that drives part of it. I wonder if people who are high up in the company say, we want this social media impact, and that's been the metric for success. So they hire someone with a big social media following like Ronaldo or Bilzerian or whatever, rather than a poker player who can really drive change, really help people get onto the site, really help people with poker.
Well, I'm enjoying this point because I just have a sort of an image in my head now of the site going, well, if we get 1% of 1% of Bilzerian, and then they spin the wheel, and then they're like, oh, another fake one, damn. Oh, it's not a real follower. Oh, shit. Let's get 1% of 1%. Oh, another fakey. Oh, no, why did he buy so many fakies? Which of course he did. He spent 30 grand of the Ignite budget in 2021 on Instagram followers, whatever the fuck that means.
Is that verified?
Verified enough for this show. Come after us.
Yeah. I think we're relying on the fact that it's not clear what jurisdiction we'd even be sued under for anything to say on this show.
Yeah, you can take everything out of my box room. You can have it all, if I'm wrong. Two more topics on the agenda today. The first one is Duels. Next week, there will be two hotly anticipated heads-up poker clashes as Phil Hellmuth and Tom Dwan do another one of those high-stakes duels. They're going to play for 100k each, so winner will get 200k, but neither player can take the money off the table just yet. Dwan would need to win another match before he could take the money with them. And I think if Hellmuth wins, he would have to play two more, which means he would actually be playing quite big sums of money. And actually, I think I'm wrong. Sorry, I think it's 200k each already. So it might be a 400k match and then an 800k match they have to play. Anyway, it could end up being big money is sort of the main point, and they can't take away the spoils of victory just yet. So that one's going to escalate, as they say. That match is on Poker Go, I think, on Wednesday night. So I'll probably tune into that one. I have enjoyed the duels. Obviously, Hellmuth has completely dominated those shows. There's been 8 shows so far. He's been on all 8. He won the first 7, beating Esfandiari and then beating Negreanu, which we all enjoyed, and then beating that guy Wright, I think his surname was. He's like a sports pundit. And then lost to Dwan, but this is the rematch against Dwan. Who do you like, Ian? Who's going to win that one?
Sorry, dude. I have zero interest in these grudge matches.
You just say a name. Jesus, it's not hard.
The fucking first one. Who's
right?
Ike. We'll have Ike, sure.
So he believes in the match between Phil Hellmuth and Tom Dwan. Ike Haxton will win that match. Thanks, Ian. That was a fantastic contribution. Yeah. Clearly, when you're not talking about science or whatever you want to talk about, you can just switch off. You can just not pay attention to what I'm talking about.
I wasn't switched off. I was tricked. Listen, these high stakes matches are great. They should be great. They can be a great learning thing. It's just I prefer consuming other content for learning about poker. And as for the dick measuring between the players, I do not give.
Fine, we're going to move away from dick measuring, and the other big heads-up duel next week is our good friend, science writer Alex O'Brien, taking on poker superstar Vanessa. Oh, you're happy now, Ian? Well, you can. I'm not even going to ask you. I'm going to ask Dara for his opinion for this.
No. Ask me.
No. Moving on.
I have a good reason.
Alex is playing Vanessa for 10k. Shush now. Shush. Courtesy of ACR, who sort of swooped in to the gap, a very big gap left by GG. A year and months, poor old Alex has been waiting for her match against Bilzerian. It was promised a long time ago. I think she won Dan Bilzerian's 21st birthday free roll in 1999 and is still waiting for her match. And she will see just in case you are watching, Dan, that's me taking things out of context for hilarious satirical effect. It's not, something that you get to replay and complain about. It's clearly a joke, like the way Doug made jokes and Thomas made jokes. It's clearly a joke. So therefore, it's like, that's the point. It's not like, this isn't fucking Panorama, I suppose is the point I'm trying to make. Anyway, Dara, who do you think is going to win between Vanessa and Alex?
I love them both, and I'm rooting for them both, but even though that's not possible. Vanessa's a full-time player. Alex is a full-time writer. She's a very good recreational player. It's heads up, so that's a bit of a leveling field. And certainly Vanessa wouldn't claim to be a heads up specialist, but you would have to make Vanessa obviously the favorite, probably like a 60% favorite or whatever it tends to be when a pro plays a recreational player heads up. But yeah, fair play to ACR for putting this on. I'm actually far more interested in this one than I am in Hellmuth against, who is it, Ike Haxton?
May as well be now.
Yeah, it's a nice closure to that story that started back in 1999, and now finally we're getting to see the heads up.
Yeah, totally agree. Fair play to Vanessa as well. If she takes it down for the 10k, she has given the 10k to charity. And yeah, look, I would sort of put the line similarly. I suppose the one thing I would say is, as you pointed out, Vanessa's not a heads up specialist. And actually, Alex has had pretty much only heads up training and coaching from people like Olivier Bousquet and others for the last few months and actually almost a year now. So her speciality is probably heads up at this point, more so than her ring game. So maybe that might shave off a couple of percent from the 60-40. Maybe she can get up to the lower mid 40s there. I really hope she wins as well. I don't think Vanessa would mind if she did it all. And looking forward to the result of that one. It should be good fun. And also, I should point out that I do have on good authority that GG have reached out to Alex, and it's not dead in the water that she plays Bilzerian. It's still out there as maybe a possibility they could get the game together.
Cool. Listen. Alex actually wanted a heads-up match against me for some practice. Fuck off. I
can't say anything, Darian. You swept the floor with me before.
Alex actually, I played her an hour before we started recording, and yeah, she's definitely taken to a bunch of the coaching she's got from Olivier Bousquet et al. She's got some moves, so it's not. So obviously, Vanessa playing as a full-time professional, you'd put your money there. It won't be as skewed as one might think. She's definitely taken to it very well. If she had more time, we actually talked about this. If she had more time, she could be a vicious poker player, but she's got a writing career, so it's hard to put in the thousands of hours you have to be an amazing poker player when you've got a writing career. She's a mum as well, So yeah, it's going to be a very interesting match to watch.
Yeah, looking forward to seeing that. That game is on Friday on ACR.
Can I revise my my prospects for Alex downwards now that I know she's had coaching from Ian?
She's only 35% now, is she?
30 Vanessa now, yeah. If anyone was putting money on this, that bet just got fucked.
I think normally amateur against a pro would be about 30-70, so I'd moved it up to 40 after hearing, Bousquet and I'm probably gone back down to 35 now.
Well, I would like to point out that both Alex O'Brien and Vanessa Kade are nominated for GPI Global Poker Awards, which brings us to that very subject. We spoke about this with Eric Danny, obviously, on the last show. He was the man who had all the knowledge of the voting systems and different things and different panels and how it was all going. And I hope we gave you a decent amount of coverage on how that was happening. But now the award nominations are out. They're down to their short list of usually 4. There might be one category where there's 5, but I think it's pretty much all 4s. And we spoke about a few people we really wanted to see win the thing. So it was great to see Christian Zetchev, for example, make the final 4. I know all 3 of us are delighted about that. Christian has worked 100%. On a lot of Unibet events down the years, and he seems to be the blogger at every event you ever attend. Even if we're all attending different events in a different place on the same day, he seems to be at all of them, blogging faster and putting out more content on each one somehow. I don't know how he does that. But Dara, what was your reaction when you saw Christian's name there? It's good to see him in the mix.
Yeah, I was delighted. He's the Phil Collins of the poker world. For those who don't get that reference because it's 40 years old, Phil Collins was the only guy who played both sides of the Atlantic in the Live Aid concert back in '85. Christian does seem to be everywhere, so it's almost like there's an army of Christians out there. There has to be a Christian Zetchev. And his productivity is just amazing, and how accurate he is. I mean, we've said all this before, so I won't repeat it. But yeah, I mean, if Christian doesn't win that category, there's something seriously wrong.
Pitchforks. There'll be pitchforks if he doesn't win. Photographer Danny Maxwell has been nominated in the media content photo category for his pretty much perfect photo of colourful pro Brandon Shaq Harris and his umbrella at the table at WSOP. I have to say it is my very favourite picture of the year, so I really hope he wins. But I want to give a shout out also to Hayley Hochstelter for her probably soon to be iconic image of an empty pavilion room at the end of the last WSOP at the Rio. I can imagine it's going to be pretty close between the two of them. Some great photos in the mix, obviously, but I do think it's the two of them will fight it out ultimately. Ian, did you see these photos? Which one did you like the best?
I did. I don't know. I'm leaning towards the cheery one from Danny Maxwell. I am biased towards Danny because he took this photo, if I may share it, of me at the Irish Open.
Oh, amazing!
So, yeah. So I am biased towards Danny, but yes, Hayley's picture of the empty Rio. There's something I mean, whenever I've seen that, I've always had my balls done in. So that reminds me of misery, usually. You know, by the time the rio is empty, so is my bank trip. So
all the money's gone.
Yeah, it's hard to like that photo for that reason. But no, it is like you say, it is a class photo. It's really iconic.
Actually, Ian, if Danny wins, I think you can probably sell your engagement photo there as an NFT and make billions.
Million. Yeah, gonna be rich.
Well, in the streamer category, Dara, you picked Kevin Martin, and he is very much in the mix. He's got some tough opposition, it must be said, in the form of Lex, Spraggy, and Ape Styles. Maybe I'll go back to you, Ian, actually, for this one, because we got Dara's take on Kevin last time round. You are a streamer, after all. So who do you like for this category? Who of the four do you think will win?
Listen, they're all have absolutely fantastic followings and hit the different niches for their different personality types. So it's really going to be difficult to separate between the four of them. All four of them could be deserving winners, if you ask me.
What a crap answer. Well, Ike Haxton's the match that he's not even playing, and one of the four. Are you even listening?
I think he wants Ike Haxton to win this one too.
Yeah, I might win this one. Yeah. There's the thing about the streamers is that it's also very saturated. There's so many poker streamers out there, and there's some sort of under the radar ones who are absolutely fantastic, who have these lovely little communities being built. So you know, it's
but why haven't you jumped in and cut off his attempt to explain his pathetic showing in this thing? And that is a very heavily competed. There are far more podcasts than there are streamers, and we still got nominated. So suck it up, Ian.
Oh yes. You guys did pick topics.
But Ian's part of the podcast.
Yeah. You all picked topics. Every topic in this section, in this lock-in, was geared so that you could make fun of me at one point.
Do you want to answer the phone, Ian? Do you want to go take a phone call in the middle of the fucking show? Really? Answer it. Answer it.
Hello? Yes, he is a cunt.
Yeah. I think he signaled to Emma that it's turned nasty.
Call me when they're being too mean.
Call me. Give me something important to leave this fucking interview for.
Well, I do sort of want to ask you a question, a follow-up one on the streaming, because obviously you've been a streamer for quite a number of years. And, you know, a big part of that is, you know, what you do off camera, I guess, as well. There's obviously a lot of community building wrapped into the job. So I thought maybe you could speak to that, and maybe, you know, these guys have obviously done a great job over the years of building their communities as well. How important is the off the table stuff?
Very. And it's not something I don't think I give it as much gusto as I could. It's definitely something I could work on in my own professional development, I think, being more active on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, even TikTok or whatever. But yeah, that's important. I don't know what else to say about that. The more you're interactive with the audience, whatever the platform, the more they're going to come and watch you. So even if you're active on Instagram, it's going to help your Twitch following too. Very
good. Well, for breakout player, we mentioned last time out Vanessa, Kade, and Kade England, who both made the shortlist, but no Jack Hardcastle. Boo. Boo. This is as good a time as any now, I guess, to point out that there weren't too many non-North Americans voted across the board. It was, as we sort of predicted with Eric Denny last time around, a bit of an American, mostly USA, but North American in general, affair. I know Eric is obviously, he has hopes and dreams of it being much more multinational, multicultural, but it didn't pan out this time. In fact, I did a little tally, 15.5. I went at 0.5 because it was co-host of a podcast. I made Hartigan European, but Stapes is obviously North American. 15.5 of the 68 nominees in the 17 panel voted categories, that's only 23%, are not from the USA or Canada. One caveat I would point out, though, is that this was a slightly weird year where the vast majority of live poker was played in the US, and a number of the industry categories are very much related to live events. So they were always going to go that way. But nonetheless, it's a really small number. And I think it shows, to my mind, that while it's fine to do global awards, if they are not sufficiently shining, I suppose, a spotlight on poker from all around the world, then you do have to maybe reconsider continental awards where, you know, we could shine a light on maybe the less obvious stuff, or people doing things in their regions, which is really important, particularly people doing things in non-English speaking territories. Dara, your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're bitching that not enough Europeans are there. but actually the people who really lose out are the non-American, non-Europeans. Once you move outside those two groups, there's almost nobody nominated, and the ones who are came in player categories where, you know, people like Michael Adamo, where it's just, you know, you just couldn't possibly ignore him. But I mean, Eric made this point himself, you know, that stuff like the Brazilian series of poker, for example, tends to get overlooked. There was a Japanese content creator in the best personality. So, you know, things are moving in the right direction. But I think, yeah, whatever it is, 53 to 15 feels very, very skewed. It probably should be about 50-50. I mean, obviously, American Canada is huge in the poker world. Nobody's arguing that. It's just that the 3-to-1 ratio feels off. And to be truly global awards, I think we should probably see more Australians, more South Americans, more Asians, etc. I think probably it comes down to who they're polling. I suspect if you got a list of the voters, you would find that the geographical bias is also that we see in the nominees is also there to the same degree in the voters. So you're obviously Americans are going to know they're Americans. We're not claiming that Americans are voting for Americans on patriotic grounds. It's just that you're going to know more about them. The people in your immediate poker ecosystem, rather than, you know, some lad in Brazil who has loads of followers there. So I think to be truly global awards, they're going to have to spread the net wider in terms of who they're getting to vote, who they're asking.
I'm not sure, Dara. I'm not, like, it could be part of the Trump doctrine that, you know, America first, that maybe they do have to vote for each other. Maybe it isn't allowed. I'm not sure.
No, I think that's unfair, because I mean, I know from talking to some Americans that you know, several Americans told me that they voted for us, for example. So people don't just vote on geographic lines, but it's just, you know, like when you go to the Eurovision, you see that most countries vote for their neighboring countries because they're the ones who are most they know the most about, and probably have the most similar tastes as well. So I think that's the issue. They needed to be truly representative of the whole poker world, rather than just, well, these are the people we interact with, so let's send them all a ballot.
Absolutely. And I think, joking aside, it is human nature to do that. So maybe the way you fix that is in the voting panels you select. And you spoke well to that. Just to back up your point as well, Dara, 12.5 of the 15.5 votes were for Europe, 2 for Australia, 1 for Asia, and not a single South American in the mix. So that really does paint a fairly obvious picture that it's basically English speaking only, and not very much outside of USA, Canada, and Europe. Then you really are slim pickings to try and find a nominee out there. Ian, I mentioned there how, like, maybe a solution to this is to sort of have regional awards as well. I'm sure a lot of people are going, oh, I fucking can't stand these awards anyway. Stupid award. Every awards or ceremonies are stupid. And they're absolutely entitled to their opinion. I think it is limited what they can achieve. And I think there is a huge amount of silliness attached to them, for want of a better way of putting it. But do you think that maybe regional awards would shine a better light on lesser known people and sort of give them the platform? Because ultimately the only use of these kinds of award ceremonies for the industry as a whole, as Eric said last week, was to sort of shine a spotlight on the industry versus other industries, which is great. But then for individuals, it's to shine a light on their content and give them a little promotional boost. So if you're not finding enough non-mainstream or non-poker mainstream people, like, you might find more of those people with a regional award. What do you think?
Yeah, 100%. I can't help but think back to sort of what I know about in Twitch, because Twitch, to a degree, isn't totally regional, because it's very multicultural. I know my stream, it is majority UK players.
But having said that, Ian, like, if they did a top 5 Newcastle poker streamers, I think you'd just about get in there.
Just about get in there. Just about.
What is it, top 5 in Newcastle?
Newcastle, yeah. Could you actually check the information? We could be wrong, Ian. Maybe you might have just missed out on a nomination, but we are checking that.
I'll take 6. 6 is fine by me. Yeah. But yes, I agree. I imagine language barriers might be part of the problem when you're talking about sort of non-English countries getting more recognition. It would require lots of people being fluent in various languages to be able to get the communication lines between them and the owners of GPI. I don't think there's a very easy solution, so I'm not going to pretend to be able to present one. But yes, it would be very nice to see more representation. I wonder if there could be more refined Twitch awards as well, because there are some absolutely fantastic streamers out there. who can't really touch Lex and Spraggy and Ital because they're in the thousands and thousands of viewers, and it's very hard to compete with that. I think there's definitely recognition to be had for some of the smaller streamers who are performing extremely well and putting on good shows.
Absolutely. One final question before we go, Dara. You made a very good point to me off camera a couple of hours ago about how maybe as well when you're trying to compose this voting panel. Now, and I know he does a good job of sort of selecting people for things that they think they'd be expert in or knowledgeable about. For example, we're on the jury for, I don't know, I think I get maybe 8 or 9 ballots. I'm sure you got something similar, but we didn't get all 20 ballots or 17 ballots or whatever it was, because obviously it was decided that we wouldn't know enough about maybe some of the other categories or what was out there. And one of the things we don't know for sure, because we don't know every name, and obviously it is supposed to be secret, but it would be a fairly good hunch, is that there's not maybe a big enough number of players. Clearly, the GPI award tries to fuse industry, which is very valid, and there's going to be a lot of industry wonks in there with players. There's a lot of player awards as well. It's probably split down the middle, actually. It might be half and half, or maybe slightly more industry than players, but pretty close. They clearly want the players showing up at the award ceremony. They clearly want a bit of glitz and glamour and a bit of star power when they have them. So they do cater to both. But I wondered then, given that they cater to both, is the makeup of these panels not too industry insider and not enough player, and that maybe that's the kind of outreach they could do in the next 12 months to redress that balance? Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, we don't know for sure because we don't know the makeup of the panel, but just looking at the results, it does seem that these are the kind of results you would get if you asked, I don't know, 70 to 80% industry people, 20 to 30% players, who is best in every category. It's difficult too, because I mean, there are obviously some categories where clearly industry people are just much better informed. Best industry person, for example, like what do players really know about that? But then there are other areas, and I'd include, podcast, written content, video content, all this stuff, where I think you really should be polling players rather than people in the space. Because ultimately, a poker podcast or a poker Twitch stream or any content like that is aimed at players. And it's the players who should sort of be in the position to say, well, I like this guy better than all his competitors because he speaks to me more, rather than, oh, well, I don't really watch Twitch streams because my job is to write articles for some poker site, but I've heard of this guy, so I'm going to vote for him because he seems to have a big following. I really wonder if it's the case where we're just moving towards a situation where we're just always nominating the 4 most watched streamers, for example, rather than anything else. And another bias, I think, which Barry Carter has talked a lot about, is there's pretty much no strategy content. Ape Styles, I think, in the Twitch stream, Twitch stream category, you could say that Ape Styles' main appeal as a Twitcher is the fact that he's an absolute beast and he does reveal his strategy in his Twitch streams. But apart from that, you look at written content, you look at video content, etc. It's all very heavily skewed towards people writing about, some human interest story in the thing rather than actual strategy content. And yet most of the sites that are appealing to players orient themselves very heavily towards strategy. And, I know, for example, on my blog, if I write a strategy post, that will do better than, me describing what it was like to play the IPO, for example. That's actually what people are far more interested in. And I think we're going back to the thing of just the wrong people are being polled on this stuff. Now, I don't want to hate on the GPI because they do an amazing job. And no matter what they do, people are going to complain. And actually, that's part of the fun. I think I said to you earlier that the thing about the awards is definitely the passive aggression of the unnominated. It makes Twitter fun for a few days as you see a guy poo-pooing the award and going, "Oh yeah, he got overlooked as well."
Yeah, look, I totally agree with the sentiment that Eric, Danny, and all the guys at Hennemob GPI work their asses off all year round to try and put on a good show here. And I think they create something for us all to talk about, and that's great. But I suppose to fully get behind your point there, I think written content, for example, as an award category is literally 4 samples of work and not maybe the body of work somebody did over the year, or not a book versus a 1,000-word essay. That's very hard to compare. And actually, I think that category of media content used to be just one category. It wasn't even split between photograph, written and streamer or video. It wasn't even broken down that way. So people were actually, I think, one year being asked to compare a funny Doug Polk video to a 1,000-word essay to a book to, I don't know, a photograph. And it's like, well, how do you even do any of that stuff? So it got silly. So in fairness, they are sort of getting with the program here and sort of creating clearer categories. But I think they could do that even more. So I think there's a couple of weird categories which are maybe just there for fun, but they don't really have much of a place in these awards. And I think if you're sacrificing some real recognitions of people to do silly ones like best trophy, no offense, Kev Matt, I know it was your idea. I also know it was your joke idea that they ran with, but that, which is fine, because again, I get the idea of doing silly ones, but don't do a silly one and then not have enough space or time to do to do worthy ones, because I think if you want to do this better, I also agree with you, Dara. I think, you know, finding a way to include players more and maybe even having more player awards in there. I know you could end up with, you know, people give out with the Golden Globes going on for 6 hours that it's like fucking giving out like 80 awards or whatever. And I know you don't want to kind of make a really boring event where there's too much of that either. Maybe you can bang out a few technical awards and people go up together to grab their trophies, so it speeds up the night. But yeah, I think there is ways to go in terms of maybe finding all the deserving categories, or just categorization, really, like figuring out a way to kind of judge like against like, I think would be really good. Ian Simpson, it has been wonderful to get you back on the show. Your second visit to the lock-in. We love having you on.
I know you love tormenting me every time I come on the show. It's hard to appear.
Well, like you say that, but then you basically didn't listen whenever it wasn't you talking, and like, you know,
I was fucking listening. You just asked questions that were outside of my niche. You asked me about COVID, and I was able to rattle off answers very easily.
Well, let other people be the judge of that. Tara O'Kern, thank you so much. It was great to have you as well.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Ian. Yeah, it's just as well you only see one person on screen every time, because every time Ian wasn't talking, I think he was doing his tax returns or something.
I hope that's what he was doing with his hands under the desk level. I hope it wasn't something else. Okay, listen, that lovely.
That's one award you two won't win. There is much better content for that out there. I give you.
Sorry, this show is actually part of the chip race. What was put in, so technically, this is an award-nominated show that you've just listened to, guys, for the first time. Just want to point that out. Thanks a million. We'll see you next time.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
No, you don't do the sign-offs, Eni. I do the sign-offs. You stay quiet again. Take care, everybody.
Such a wanker.